In this video, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to the concept of redirection, file redirection in Linux. And so this is going to be really useful to you as our programs are getting more complex and we don't want to be typing in our inputs, or maybe we want to save our outputs to a file so we can take a look and see if we have errors. So in general, in Linux, we can use the greater than and the less than signs to redirect what would be just going to the console or coming from the console. So for example, if I just run a command like ls, so that's list contents of the directory, and if I pass in, if I use the -l flag, then I'm going to get a nice list of those contents. And let's say I just look in the public directory because there's some stuff in there. So here we see that when I run this command, there is output to what we call standard out, and that's just the console. And so I can use redirection to, instead of writing this output to the console, I can write it to a file. So I'm just going to call that lsout.txt, and then if I use vim to take a look at that, I see that it's just the same output that I would have seen on the console. So I can also redirect what we call standard in, so that's just the standard input, to be, instead of the console, from a file. So for example, let's say I have a file, I have a C file like redirect.c here. And so what we can see is that all redirect.c is doing is it is reading 3 numbers from standard in. So that would normally be the console. And these are separated by white space. So we've just got our little integer placeholders here, some white space, integer placeholder, white space, and then another integer placeholder. And then we're just going to print those to the screen. So we've done this lots of times, but let's just see it in action. Compile this, and then let's just run it. So here it's waiting for me to put in the input through the console. I press enter, and we can see that it read in the numbers 1, 2, and 3. But if I want to do this from a file, just using redirection, I can use, again, my less than sign. So I would do that. Let's take a look actually at this text file that I have right here. So you can see this text file just has what I would type in, just 3 numbers separated by white space. So I can just do redirect, but using the less than sign, I'm going to use this file as my standard input, and so you can see here that it read those numbers. And if I wanted to be really fancy here, I could not only read in from a file, but I could also write to a file. So say I wanted to write, instead of to the console, I want to write to a file called out.txt. Now you can see nothing gets printed to the console, but if I take a look at out.txt, here's my output. So one other trick that will be useful for today's classwork, and in general might be useful for you, is what if I have, instead of, I want to take a look at nums.txt, what if instead of just one line here, I had some unknown number of lines? I'll just put in 3 lines, but let's say I don't know how many lines I'm going to get. So I can change redirect.c to read in lines of 3 numbers using while. So scanf will return to me the number of inputs that were successfully read. And so as long as that is 3, then I should keep reading the next line. So I can do something like oops, while, and so I said this scanf, so it assigns all these numbers, but it also returns back to me, in this case, it'll return back to me 3 as long as it had 3 inputs. So as long as that is true, then I would like to just, let's say, print these numbers. That's all I want to do in this program. So I'll just go ahead and do that. And so we can take a look and see if this works. So again, we're just going to compile and let's run redirect, and we need to use nums.txt. So that looks like it worked. And so just to really convince ourselves, we could do something like maybe remove one of these lines, and we can just make sure that it still works, and it does. So one really important takeaway that I'll leave you with is that this file redirection is happening through the operating system. It's not C. So you don't have to change your C code at all to use redirection. And this is definitely might be on the quiz. So make sure that you understand it's the operating system, not C, that does file redirection. But it is a quick and easy way for us to read input from a file and write input from a file.